Thank you very much. Welcome to the CSA AI Summit for quarter one of 2025. Today we're going to talk a little bit about the future of trust in an AI world. There's a lot happening in the AI space right now, and I think it's time for us to really rethink how we conceptualize AI and security, risk, compliance, privacy, and that's not a hot take. We'd also need to move away from AI being seen as this big, scary thing that needs a unique approach, and we need to get back to our basics, right? Fundamentals are fundamental for a reason. ISO 42001, for example, is a really good way of looking at it and starting that process. And it's not just about how we improve our own internal practices around AI and system operations. It's about our vendors and the supply chain that we all participate in. So the big question right now for a lot of us, I think, is how do we build trust with customers and partners when there's more on our plates than ever? We've got faster development cadence, more pressure to iterate and innovate. And I think it really goes back to focusing on foundational elements of security and privacy programs. For most of us who aren't building frontier AI models and doing AI research and things like that, AI is a trust problem, or opportunity, if you want to look at it that way, that's based mostly in process and procedure. It's not actually a technical hurdle that requires some kind of novel approach in most cases. Vanta surveyed 2,500 IT and business leaders for a State of Trust report last year, and that report and that data tells us that cybersecurity threats are the number one concern for businesses, higher even than financial and operational risk. And that makes sense. We can plan for financial risks, we can kind of plan for business risk. We can't necessarily plan for when or how a confidentiality, integrity, or availability incident event is going to happen. And more than half, I think it was 55% of the people that we surveyed, say that security risks for their business have never been higher. That includes 1 in 2 organizations saying that they detect and respond to security threats at least once a week. And there's a lot of wiggle room in what is a security threat and how people interpret that based on their own environment, their own company, and their own demands. But just from an empirical perspective, that sounds right in my experience. So, AI, you got this. Here's the good news. We do know what to do. We have the tools to ensure that we're building trusted AI products. We're getting standards for adding AI tools and making sure that they are interoperable and supported, and everybody kind of understands what we're looking at and how they should be operating and what trust is, what safety is. CSA has done some stuff in the space. I've been participating in a bunch of ML Commons work around AI benchmarking and safety. I think Anthropic has a responsible scaling policy. There's a lot of work being done to kind of give us visibility into what we care about and why and how. And another good thing is we have broadly aligned on priorities. We don't necessarily agree on the problem statements, but generally speaking, we agree on where we are, what we need to do. Right? Government tends to care about democracy, rule of law, and human rights. And the private industry and private sector usually cares about privacy, explainability, and bias management in decision-making systems and things of that nature. So we do know where we need to go, and we do have most of the tooling that we need. The bad news, and another AI image that's doing its best, the toolkit is rusty in some places, or it's missing a widget, or needs a bit of a refresh. Usually the rusty bits, from what I've seen, are things we kind of know we struggle with as an industry. We're talking about data inventory and access management and privacy and things that are generally going to be kind of constant thorns that are hard to navigate, hard to balance, and prone to breakage anyway. But we do have tooling, we do have process. We're okay in that space too. So, for context, I led Vanta's ISO 42001 certification. We are one of the first organizations on Earth to get an accredited 42001 certificate, and certainly the first in our space. I also led the charge on reworking our vendor risk management program to adapt to a lot of the new AI pressures we're seeing. And the TLDR is most organizations playing in or with AI pretty seriously are well positioned to succeed here. This is not a giant sea change ocean, right? It's still water. The waves are a little different, but it's still the same data we're already working with. It's largely about leveraging what we already have and finding ways to provide paved roads and guide rails, not gates, all those kind of cliches, but they actually do make a lot of sense. It's also about how we lean in. We all know at this point AI is not going away. We all know that it's going to continue to grow and continue to be kind of put into everything. The days of wondering, is every tool going to have AI in it somewhere, are kind of behind us at this point. Now it's about adapting and iterating and being in a position where we can take advantage of the benefits of AI and the opportunities that it gives us in the most reasonable and safe and secure ways. So, you got this. For the purposes of an internal toolkit, this is going to be mostly tied to security and compliance, engineering, product, data science, all the kind of the typical actors you would expect when we talk about AI and AI systems and development. But this can also include teams like sales or customer support or success, marketing, procurement, even note-taking applications or operations. And there's so many different places where this is going to pop up for us that it's really important that we try not to get stuck in a small, simple, kind of one track or one dimensional mindset about where AI can help and where we want to keep an eye on it and where our assumptions may not be doing us justice and giving us the flexibility and the freedom that we need to succeed. So, start with what you have. For internal AI controls, it's going to be an interesting exercise to kind of figure out what that looks like. But we always want to start with current state. Review your internal controls, review your internal operations. What are the development teams doing? What are the product teams doing? What are customers asking for? And figure out what things already look like. A lot of us are already going to have a SOC 2 or an ISO 27001 cert or something like that. And we will have a pretty good idea of existing ops. We want to look for places where we can ingrain good practices into what they're already doing, enhancing or tweaking instead of blowing up and, nuke and repave approach. For something like that, having an automated GRC tool that can provide visibility across teams and domains can be super, super helpful. The ability to cross-map requirements from one framework to another, one team to another, the ability to create and edit requirements as needed to really customize a control ecosystem can be very, very useful. And it's very, very important when we're dealing with something like this where it's super collaborative and super cross-team that we really also focus on failure alerting and communication and visibility into what's currently working and what's currently not working. The idea of an open control that hasn't been satisfied or recently started failing. Why did it start failing? There's a lot of value in having a kind of a single pane of glass. That term's been beaten to death at this point, but there's something there. It's not strictly necessary to have some kind of automated tool for it, but computers are kind of cool, and it's kind of nice to be able to automate things. Spreadsheets are kind of not cool, and while they do probably hold up 90% of the Jenga tower that is the modern technology industry, if we peel back all the layers, we should really be looking to evolve our processes and how we manage our operations and our compliance, just as much as we support the teams that we operate around and give advice to. We focus a lot on their maturity, and it's important that we also focus on ours and how our processes and operations can accelerate and work with them and for them. Obviously, you're going to want to align with your primary values and your risk appetite. So when you're looking at what you want to accomplish for your AI system, whether it's ISO 42001 or just implementing best practices, It's really, really critically important that we remember as security and compliance and privacy practitioners that nobody wants to get left behind in this, right? There's immense pressure to ship, get AI in, use AI, find places to accelerate with AI. But it's also really, really crucial that we remember we have a responsibility to do things as right as we can in that, within those constraints. It is a balancing act, but we get to be advisors and influencers in the process, which is really powerful and really important for us. So, like I was saying, I'm going to integrate current processes wherever you can. This is also really, really cool for procurement. When we're looking at buying tools, making sure that we're thinking, does this vendor have AI functionality? What teams are going to be using it? How can we apply that elsewhere? And really looking for ways to synergize your AI systems and your AI development with what, we're all going in the same direction, making sure everybody's working together. Once we understand our team's process, right, we're talking engineering, could be HR, product, whatever. We want to start embedding new operations into that process. So most of what I needed for 42001, we already had in some form. We use product reference or resource documents, what we call PRDs, and these are design documents with architecture, risk validation, design trade-offs, and go, no-go, and all kinds of stuff like that. And a lot of 42001 is very governance heavy, right? Depending on your specific AI system, it might require some pretty deep technical validation, but at its core, it's very much a process and procedure governance audit. So I just had to add a checkbox here, a validation there, a little bit of enrichment in some of the documentation we were already doing. And that got us to where we needed to be fairly easily. If done well, a lot of teams will actually really appreciate this. One of the requirements, or a couple of the requirements in 42001 are around AI impact assessments, right? Does this system have significant risk of bias? What are possible benefits to individuals, groups of individuals? What are risks to individuals or groups of individuals? And that's something that a lot of product and engineering teams kind of already ponder, but not in that same way. We've actually seen some changes in our overall engineering processes because of the 42001 implementation, where we're thinking about some of those documents on our end a little differently. We're going a little deeper in places we weren't before, just because it's really, really cool to provide some structure and some formatting to make those kind of validations and reviews that teams do more consistent across teams. Sometimes you'll have silos of behaviors, and we found that a lot of the stuff that 42001 was asking us to do was a little bit above what we were already doing in a really good way that has actually made us more effective now that we've started doing it. Inherently, our engineers do want to do the right thing as well. I think people get into engineering to build stuff and have fun and do cool things. And it's really important that we find ways to give them the tools they need to succeed for that, and kind of challenging assumptions here and there when necessary to help them build the coolest thing they can. For example, making sure that when we're doing a validation on a feature or doing a go, no-go, do we want to launch this? Do we think this is the right solution? All the different kind of planning and development and design work, or pre-planning work, asking questions like, is AI really the right choice for this? What else have we tried? Have we even considered something else? What's the pain point that this is solving? Simple kind of product design prioritization questions are really, really useful for helping to give everyone context and keep everyone on the same page and building the same kind of tools. So once we've kind of got our internal systems optimized and figured out, we know what we're doing, we've added the checks and balances where we need them, we focused on guide rails, not gates, and making sure that we have paved roads, that our preferred behavior for development or testing or launching product or anything like that, once we've already ensured that that process is the easiest one, right? We want people to just, path of least resistance should be the best path we can give. we can move on to things like internal program and vendor review work. And these don't necessarily have to happen separately. They don't have to happen one, like, internal ops first, then vendor. This can happen in any order you want. But I found that focusing internally was really helpful for helping me to define what I care about and what we care about externally. This is the classic build versus buy. But we do have the toolkit. We know it and use it already. A lot of us have vendor management systems of some type. We have a procurement process we follow. And this entire domain, the entire AI domain, presses really heavily on data ownership, data provenance, data privacy, vendor reviews, scope drift, right? We buy a vendor and then 6 months later, we want to add a new feature from that vendor. Are we going back and revalidating the vendor again? Are we ensuring that the changes in how the vendor is processing our data are being taken into account? Where do we care about that? Should we care about that? And this will require a bit of a rethink when we look at how we handle our relationships with external parties that use AI. Because they're going to be using it, they're going to be buying it. When it comes to ownership, data management, privacy, identify what you really care about most. For a lot of us, that's going to be things like simple data security, vendor changes over time, and really, really zeroing in on who and what and why for the use of an AI system and the use of a vendor. We can't necessarily say we're not using this vendor, right? Our role in security is to support and empower and enable and provide guidance and help people make informed decisions. So when we're looking at a vendor, even if it gives us the ick feeling that we sometimes get, and we're just like, ooh, this is a weird idea, it's really, really, really important that we think through the system, especially for an AI system, as data flows and processes at the network and system level, the data level, right? Where does the data live? What kind of data is it? And the human level. Like other automation, AI speeds things up. And that means it can either accelerate a really well-working process, or it can just accelerate, things will break faster now. So when we're evaluating vendors and partners in the AI space, it's really important that we think through it on all the levels that it touches on. Where is the data, what data, who owns it, all that kind of stuff. Where does it flow? Where is it going? What's actually how is it being interacted with or transformed? And then who is using it and how and where. We also want to talk about things like defining our core, most important kind of first principles for our vendors. An AI system is a reflection of the priorities and values of the group that built it. And what it does says something about that group, and how it does it says something about that group. But what it doesn't do also says a lot. It might actually say more, right? AI tells us what we care about, and what the AI doesn't care about is probably something we don't care about. So questions that I would say we want to start with when talking about AI vendor review, more tactical application here. What data do I care about? Is it my data? Is it customer data? Is it both? Do I care if a vendor is going to be seeing employee data? Or am I only concerned with customer kind of platform data that's in my SaaS application that they send me? What are they going to do with that data, right? Can I get vendors to agree to not train on customer data, but do I care if they train on my data? How important is data retention, right? How long are they going to store this data? How often are they going to wipe it? Can I request at any time to have data deleted? And then are they demonstrating best practices? Are they being evasive? Are they not answering questions? Finally, I like to get into the architecture a little bit as well, because that tells me about the system too. What kind of system are they using? Is this retrieval augmented generation? Supervised or unsupervised learning? Is it just a wrapper on top of an established model? Are they doing document chunking? There's a lot to go into to kind of help us understand what the actual scope and risk is, well outside of just the AI scary. And then we want to prioritize tools that help us move as fast as AI does. Effective security, by definition, will add some kind of friction. It's about finding places where it's worth it and where it can be integrated with existing approaches. Adding new stops and blocks and that kind of thing is going to lead a lot of people to just find ways around. A classic picture of the gate on the sidewalk and the grass on each side, and there's just paths around both sides. We want to avoid that wherever we can. So, wrapping it all up. AI is the same problems that we've been dealing with for years exacerbated. And a lot of the tools we have today are good, but we're starting to see some of the edge cases and corner cases where they're not quite there. Whether you're in spreadsheets, manual methods, at like time, visibility, we're being held back by not thinking about our operations in the right ways. For centralizing things, right? We want to focus on bringing data together, bringing teams together, bringing operations together, and making sure that we're not all pulling at the rope in different directions. That's super common, especially across really rapidly moving development groups. And making sure that we can easily adapt evidence, easily control processes, easily support each other and signal this isn't working or this is working is super valuable. Like I said, single pane of glass, beaten to death. SOAR is or was more trouble than it was worth for a lot of orgs. But high visibility and high communication are usually really, really, really good starting places for that. Automation, continuous monitoring. Major pain point for a lot of us is coordination across teams. And like I said, we have to innovate, we have to iterate, we have to move fast on this. So the ability to assign owners to controls and evidence and set a cadence on when it needs to be done and communicate with them without having to manually hunt them down in Slack or a meeting is really, really valuable. And then vendor risk. AI can be used to review vendors, and it sounds easier than it is to teach an LLM how to read a SOC 2 report. It's a lot more complicated than just dumping it in and saying, give me a review. There's a lot of prompt engineering that goes into it, and naturally a human has to be the one who makes the ultimate decision. But it's really nice to have a tool where I can feed it a couple vendor reports, and then it'll spit out, here's what it thinks. And if I have a question, it'll actually tell me, this is where I got that information from. And a good central repository of vendors in use, always good to have. So, Band-Aid fix here, you've got this. We have the tools, we have the knowledge, there's places where we want to improve them, where we need to improve them, but I think for the most part we are set up for success. These are not insurmountable problems, and security and privacy and compliance have seen worse. We need approaches that can help us keep up with the need for innovation and keep supporting the teams that we are supposed to empower. We're here to help them and provide a careful and considered approach. So we don't want to reinvent the wheel. It's easy to feel like AI has a huge new paradigm and there's no answer, but this is the same data we already have. It's just a question of looking at it a little differently and looking at how we use it a little differently. Like I said, it's the same water, same waves, they're just shaped a little bit differently now. Solutions don't have to be perfect, they just need to be enough to mitigate risks. Thank you very much.